Welcome back to Management 386. Today we're going to pick up the conversation where we left off last class, and we were talking about the squares within the business canvas that related to channels and to customer relationships. And if you remember, we said channels are the way that we reach our customer. This is how we inform our customers, and this is how we win our customers. After we win them, customer relationships are the way that we retain them. Today, we're going to talk about specific ways that we reach our customers in our channels. Specifically, how do we inform them about our business? And then how can we use marketing to win them and help customers to build trust in our product so that they're wanting to use it? Now, if we think about this whole entrepreneurial process, we've come a long way. We've made it almost through the entire entrepreneurial process that we're going to talk about in 386 that started with the individual entrepreneur becoming self-aware, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, to building a great team, the members that need to be on an acquisition team, how that we use entrepreneurial awareness to observe what's going on around us to hopefully identify some things that could be problems in the market that the market would like to have solved and that the market's willing to pay for. We call those entrepreneurial opportunities. Once we see those opportunities, then we can be creative and we can think of multiple solutions to try to solve the problem for the market. We evaluate those ideas, see which one is the best opportunity, and then we can move forward with identifying our target market or our customer segments. We've learned that we should be very specific when we talk about our customer segments and our target market. The more specific that we can be about our customer segments, the more beneficial it will be for our business, and specifically, the better that we can market to them. So today we're going to pick up with that conversation, and let's start talking about customer segments and why it's so important to be so specific. Let's think about it this way. If we get one of the large buckets of popcorn from the movies, one that's really full, we're like, yeah, we want to share this with our customers. We want to make them happy. And we just take that bucket of popcorn and just toss it. Popcorn goes everywhere. And lots of people get a couple of bites of popcorn. But when it's finished, no one's really satisfied. That's what it's like when we try to market our company and we try to say a lot of things to a lot of people. We're just tossing out a lot of popcorn and everybody's just getting a little bit, but nobody's really getting enough. However, if we take that same bucket of popcorn and we look out at the people around and notice that there is someone specifically named John in the crowd who fits our target market, then we can take our popcorn and walk over to John and say, hey, John, would you like to share some popcorn? And let's talk about the business that I'm starting. Then we have been able to use the same amount of resources in a much more efficient and effective way. And we can build a relationship one-on-one with our target customer. We can give John a lot more popcorn and be sure that he's happy and understands everything about our business. So in thinking about that example, we want to be very specific about our target market. Once we think we know who it is, then we ask ourselves the question, which ones of those? Narrow down even more, which ones of those? And once we get it down to what we feel like is the smallest, most manageable size, then we want to start doing some research on this customer segment, target market. And we want to figure out how is it that our customer receives information and how is it that they value shopping. This is how we're going to plan out our marketing. So when I like to ask students in class, like, how are you going to market your product? They say social media. And I'm like, okay, how? And there's a lot, Facebook. Okay, how? Oh, just an ad. Okay, for who? And when we really start trying to narrow down talking about marketing, people really have this big picture idea of kind of what it looks like, but doing it well is really a very, very narrow, very strategic, very focused process. Now, in reading chapter 30, it told you all about developing a marketing plan. It outlined every step in there that you should follow for developing that marketing plan. It also pointed out to you that that marketing plan is as important as your business canvas and or business plan. We want to know exactly how we're going to reach our customers. We want to plan our marketing efforts to reach them in the way that they receive information. And then we want to be able to check what we're doing and see if we're doing well. We want to set goals. Did we reach those goals? If not, what do we need to adjust? Do we need to adjust the information we're sharing, or do we need to adjust the way that we're delivering information? And this is a very, in-depth process. There are companies out there that are marketing companies, and this is all they do, but it is that important. Now, for you in this class, I want you to understand how important the marketing plan is. I want you to understand all of the steps of the marketing plan as outlined in the chapter, but I'm not going to make you do one. The semester is just too short to get into that depth. But the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is to understand that this is something that you should plan before you ever open your doors. This is something you should plan early on, that you should plan in depth, and you should be very specific about. And it should focus entirely around your target customer, how they want to receive information and how they want to shop, not how you receive information and how you like to shop. I ask lots of questions to my students in person about, if you were going to market to me, how would you reach me? And this helps them to better understand how specific marketing is. I am a working mom. I work full time. I have 2 children. I have 2 girls, 1 3, 1 12. And how do I receive information? They always come out with something like, oh, we'll put an advertisement on Shark Tank, because they think that because I'm the entrepreneurship professor, I watch Shark Tank. But don't forget, I'm a working mom with little girls. We don't watch Shark Tank at home. My girls aren't interested in the least in Shark Tank. So no, that's not the way to reach me. Things become even more complicated now when we start thinking about the way that television even works. So I stream television through YouTube or Netflix or Disney. So most of the time I never even see commercials. So trying to reach me through television is probably not an effective way to get information to me. Further, they'll start thinking of like radio stations that I listen to. And then it gets even more complicated now. Well, do I listen to AM or FM, or do I listen to satellite radio? And they need to determine which one I listen to. And then what do I listen to on that actual avenue? Turns out I happen to listen to satellite radio. It's very rare that I'm in the car by myself. I'm always taking a kid to school or picking this kid up on my way to work and then coming in. I don't want my children to hear a lot of what's on mainstream radio. So you may hear a lot of kid bops in mine, or a lot of streaming from my phone. Oh gosh, if I've played the Frozen soundtrack once, I've played it a million times. So it's really iffy to get me with radio as well. So then we talk about social media. Okay, well, how do I take in social media? Where would you put your ads? Well, the traditional college student right now is really into Twitter and Snapchat. I like Twitter. Snapchat? No, not a good place to reach me. Social media is very generational. So if you want to reach me, Facebook is probably the best way. Now, as you can see through these examples, you have to really think through as you're developing that marketing plan and make it for your customer, not for you. And once we go through chapter 30 and see all the steps of the marketing plan and all the different types of mediums of advertising, then we have to figure out, okay, well, what is it that we're going to say? Before I jump into that, which is chapter 29, which is about branding, I want to say one other thing about chapter 30. In chapter 30, I want you to know all the steps of a marketing plan. I want you to understand what a positioning statement is, and I want you to be really familiar with all of those steps. It gives you a lot of information in the book about the different mediums in advertising. I don't want you to know all of that. You don't have to get in depth about everything it tells you about newspaper, billboards, etc. I just want you to know all the avenues that exist. I'll give you a test review that'll help you understand more of what I want you to pull out of chapters 29, 30, and 31, but don't worry about getting lost in all the info that's in there about all the details of each advertising medium. Okay, so let's pull it back then. So we know we've got to develop a marketing plan, and this is how we're going to reach our target customers. Well, now then, how do we figure out what we're going to say? Well, one of the first ways that we can start to think through this is to develop a brand for a company. Now, brands are very, very important. Every company, every person has a brand. A brand is your personality, a brand is your story, and it is the way that the public perceives you. Every person has one. The difference between successful people, companies, and the ones that aren't so successful are that the successful ones control their story. Their brand strategy is very strategic, and it is implemented and carried out. They control their narrative. Let's think about a company out there that controls their narrative really well. Let's think about Chick-fil-A. Now, when we think about Chick-fil-A and we're like, okay, well, what is their brand? When you think of Chick-fil-A, what do you really think of? Most people think of good customer service, of feeling welcome, of getting food that's quick. They have the best traffic engineers out there rolling people through the drive-through. And they make you feel welcome. It's my pleasure. They make it feel like they enjoy serving you. Now, they build this brand and implement it and implement it and implement it on an ongoing basis. And the reason they do this is because they control their story. We can think of other smaller chains that perhaps sell chicken. One of the ones that's in the Southeast, I'm not sure if you have it everywhere, is a Zaxby's. Zaxby's is just a chicken finger place, but they do have a little bit wider menu. Now, they don't really get lost in the polite customer service persona that Chick-fil-A has. Zaxby's drive-through line is going to be much slower. You're not going to hear my pleasure. But when you walk into a Zaxby's to sit down and eat, they have perfected making it feel local. Wherever the Zaxby's is located, they tend to gather in local artifacts, local art to make it feel like it is that town specific. They make their seating area where people sit feel more like a sit-down restaurant as opposed to a fast food, very sterile environment that you get at a Chick-fil-A. Now, Zaxby's controls the way that people perceive them, but in a much different way than Chick-fil-A. Zaxby's doesn't push the pleasant customer experience, but they also don't tolerate a bad customer experience. So it's really interesting when we think about the two different brands, because what happens is as consumers, it changes our expectations of what's going to happen when we get there. When we get to Chick-fil-A, we expect fast, polite service. And if we don't get it, we're appalled. We're like, they didn't say my pleasure. Oh, they didn't get my order correct. This took longer than 30 seconds. And it's because Chick-fil-A set those expectations. When we go to Zaxby's, we don't expect to go through the drive-through line fast. We don't expect the person at the counter to be like gushing, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you and to help you. We don't expect that. So when it doesn't happen, we're not let down. You see, your brand builds trust with your consumers, and it also builds their expectation of what's going to happen when they arrive at your business. So it's important for you as the owner of the business, even as a person managing your personal brand, to be sure that you are building a brand that you can live up to, that sets expectations that you can carry out, and that you do this on an ongoing basis. So when we think about developing a brand, we need to sit back and make the brand strategy. How do we want consumers and the market to perceive us? What expectations do we want them to have when they arrive at our place of business and shop? How do I make sure that that's what they're experiencing? You need to think this through, write it out, articulate it, and plan it out. And after you have established what you want your brand to be, then you have to execute it. Execute, execute, execute. It's important that you hire people based upon their ability to live out your brand. The first person a customer sees when they get to your place of business is one of your employees. If your employee breaks with your brand and doesn't live up to the customer's expectations, you've possibly lost a customer. So you have to pick your employees knowing that they can exude your brand. And then you have to train them on how to exude your brand, and train them and train them. And when you're finished training them, in 3 months, you train them again, because you have to remind them to constantly perform to exude your brand. And then you have to hold them accountable. You have to make sure they're doing it. All of this is super important to make sure you are in control of your story. Now, let me tell you something a little interesting about the human brain. And this is the reason it's so important to be in control of your story and your brand. I learned a great term. The word is confabulation. And honestly, it's probably one of my most favorite words in the English language. And it sounds like one of those words somebody made up where they like combined 2 words and said confabulation, but it's not. It's a psychological term. And I'm going to tell you what it means in just a second, but let me start by saying this. The human brain interprets events through stories. We need a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that we can understand what's happening around us. Now, sometimes we just get little bits of information. We don't get the full story. And when that happens, our brain will lie to itself, and it will make up little details to fill in to the blanks so that it can make a story, beginning, middle, end, that makes sense so they can start to interpret what's happening. Example, you're standing on the sidewalk and the light's red. You're waiting for the little I can walk sign to pop up. And so you're waiting there patiently, and it pops up. It pops up and it's like, okay, light's red, it's time for me to walk. And you hear something and you look up and a vehicle comes barreling, speeding through the red light and goes right past you, right as you're about to walk through. And you're like, oh my gosh. Scares you because you almost step out in front of them. Well, our brains start to put together this story. One story may be like, oh my gosh, that person must be like have an emergency. Why else would they be driving so quickly through the stoplight? Another possible story we may say is like, that person was probably on their phone, not paying any attention, and just barreled through that light. It's a good thing they didn't kill anybody. Or another story might be, oh my gosh, I wonder if something's wrong with their car. Or we could just be like, wow, what a butthole. They really didn't even care that the light was red, and all they cared about was getting to where they wanted to go. All very different stories. But the truth is, the only thing we know is a car sped through and ran the red light. That's all we know. But as you think about that, you'll see that your brain starts to fill in details that might or might not be true, that you never saw, that makes a story so that you can start to interpret what just happened. This is those details that they fill in are the confabulations. It's the lies our brain tells ourselves to help us make sense of things that are going on. Now, I tell you this to say that's why it's important that you control your story and your brand and you do it well. Because for every human that's out there, they'll get a few pieces of information and their brain is going to create a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you do not give them enough details to fill in so that you are controlling what the story is, then you have no idea what the story will be. And that's a very scary place to be as a business. It could be that you did have an emergency and you were driving that car and you were trying to get somewhere. It could be that you were just on your phone. We don't know what story the public will come up with if we don't control it. And if they come up with a negative story, then chances are they're not going to trust us and they're not going to shop with us and they're not going to be our customer. Now, what your brand is up to you. But the most important part I want you to take away from chapter 29 is to understand that it's your story, it's your personality. You need to be in control of that story, be very purposeful about it, have it planned out. Write your brand strategy and then do brand audits. Go back and see, like, is my brand really what I think it is? Do people perceive my company as I want them to and as I think they should? And then make adjustments if you are not finding what you want. The better brand that you can build will actually build dollar equity. The brand Nike worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, just the brand. The brand of Amazon worth millions and millions. So is the brand Apple. None of their products, just their brand. Really important for your businesses. It's important for you as an individual as well. Every person has a perception of who you are. It's important that you control that story. You control it by your social media posts. You control it by your LinkedIn profile, whether you do or don't have one. So it's really important that you clean up any social media you have to be sure that every post you have on there tells the story that you're wanting people to perceive about you. This is really important as you go on the job hunt. Employers do scour social media to figure out who you are, to construct a story about you, to see if you're a proper fit for their company. I'm not saying that's fair. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but life's not fair. And that's the way the game is played. So be super careful about your personal brand. Your brand is what you're going to exude, and that's going to start what your messaging is through marketing. Now, you want your brand to come through in your marketing, and then we can have different specials, promotionals that could also come out in specific marketing. Perhaps we're having a 2-for-1 sale or a back to school sale. These types of messages are going to be different for every business, depending upon what it is that you're trying to sell or your goals for that day. So we're going to have goals for our branding strategy and our marketing strategy. We're going to constantly look at those strategies. We're going to do brand audits. We're going to look at our marketing and make sure it is performing effectively. And then we're going to make adjustments if it's not. The final thing that I want to talk to you today is about one other way to get the word to your customer about you and who you are, and to also start to build that relationship. And that is through PR, public relations. We always think about marketing as something that we buy, and lots of times public relations is not. Public relations is more of a word of mouth. It's a press release. It is somebody doing a story on you and highlighting you, whether it's in a magazine or in a vlog or wherever it might appear. Now, it would seem like, it makes perfect sense. I'm just going to do PR the whole time. And that would be great if that were possible. But because it's free, it's not always possible. And in chapter 31, it gives you some good tips on how to make it happen, how to get those press releases, how to get journalists to do stories about you. And they're hard to get, but when you can get it, it's the most effective advertising. because people are more inclined to trust word of mouth than they are a paid advertisement. Think about when you do a Google search. If you're like me, I'll do a Google search on something, and then the first 10 things that pop up are going to say sponsored, 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 ad, sponsored, sponsored. I'm going to like pass right by those and start at the bottom of the page where I get to somewhere that they didn't pay to be there, because I trust that information more than someone who paid to be there. It's interesting how the brain works, but that's how public relations can play out. Gives you a lot of great ways to do some public relations. Like I said, how to get the press releases. It also talks about events and how important events and promotional events can be for your business to get the word out, to get in touch with your customer, to have a good interaction with them so that you can win them as a customer, inform them about you and inform them about your product, and that you can start to build that relationship. Now, that's a lot of info, chapters 29, 30, and 31, and it all falls into the due diligence that is required to finish out your channels square. Remember, channels is how to inform your customers about you and how to win them. What we tell them revolves around the brand we develop for ourselves. Our marketing plan is how we're actually going to get the word to them and how we're going to start winning them as customers. That can also include PR and public relations. I hope that this has all been really clear for you and you've been able to understand it very well. If not, email me and I can try to help you out as best as possible. Stay tuned. We're going to jump in our next 3 classes, and we're going to look at the only 2 squares of the business canvas that we have not talked about and gotten information on how to complete the due diligence to fill in, and that is the cost and the revenue portion of the business plan. Next 3 classes are going to be all about numbers, all about financial statements. So tune in and be ready to do some numbers. Great being with you today. Thanks.